Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Today we're going to be talking about multiplying and dividing real numbers. Basically, we're going to be kind of reviewing some of the tricks and things and how you can multiply, especially and divide, especially with negative numbers, and how to kind of remember the tricks associated with those when you don't have a calculator. All right. So, why does 2 times 4 equal 8? Well, this is kind of a dumb question. You might be like, well, I've known that 2 times 4 equals 8 since first grade, maybe kindergarten. Why do I need to know about that? But it is really important to think about what do these things actually mean, because they're going to help us when we try to do some more complicated versions of them. So why does 2 times 4 equal 8? Well, it's because multiplication just means repeated addition. So it's 2 plus 2 plus 2 plus 2, which is 8. And you could simple, or you could think of it as 4 plus 4, because there's 2 4s, so it's like that repeated addition, okay? So then when we say, why does negative 2 times 4 equal negative 8, we can use that same logic, okay? In this case, it's negative 2, negative 2, negative 2, negative 2 equals negative 8. So then why does negative 2 times negative 4 equal 8? Okay, well, that one doesn't quite work into that definition we're using before. So what we can do instead is kind of think of a sequence that we can set up that'll help us kind of know and kind of get to that answer there. So we know that negative 2 times 4 equals negative 8. Negative 2 times 3 equals negative 6. Negative 2 times 2 equals negative 4. Before I keep going, do you guys start to see sort of a pattern here, right? We're going from negative 8 to negative 6 to negative 4. So I can think, all right, well, what's the next one going to be? It looks like I'm adding 2 each time. So the next one's probably going to be negative 2, which it is. And then we can kind of keep going until we get to, oh, look. We can see we're adding 2 each time. And we can see that that next one is going to be 2, and then we're going to get 4, and then 6, and then finally we'll end up with 8. Okay, and so we can see that through that sequence, this is why that negative times a negative equals 8. Now, I know in the past we've told you guys a million times, oh, a negative times a negative is positive, but we've never really gone through about the reasons why, all right? So now that we know the reasons why, we want to make sure that we keep that in our brains and we keep that consistent when we're simplifying some expressions and we have to do some of this multiplication. All right, so when we multiply two real numbers, these are the rules that we're going to be following, okay? First of all, if the signs are the same, our product is going to be positive. So if they have the same sign, we're going to be positive, okay? 8 times 5 equals 40. Negative 4 times negative 5 equals 20. The same sign, going to be positive. And there's a few more examples. Doesn't matter if we have fractions or decimals or anything. That's going to all work the same. If they're different, our product will be negative, okay? So if one is positive and one is negative, I'm going to get a negative product when I go ahead and I multiply those together. And there's a bunch of different examples we could look at that, okay? You also could think of it as counting the number of negative factors. An even amount of negative factors will be positive. An odd amount of negative factors will be negative. This is going to be something that's very helpful when we have multiple things being multiplied. Multiple things being multiplied, that's a lot to say. Okay, but we're going to see that a lot today, where we have 3, 4, 5, 6 things being multiplied. Well, I don't just have two numbers, so I want to look and see, do I have an even number of negatives or an odd number? Because that'll tell me what my product is going to be. All right, let's look at a couple examples here, okay? This first one, we have negative 8 times 7. There's only two things here, so I can just say, oh, different signs. It's going to be negative. We're going to get negative 56 for that one. For the next one, negative 2 times 3 times negative 4. This is an instance where I have more than two things being multiplied, in this case 3. So I want to kind of go back and use this rule right here and see if I have an even amount of factors or an odd amount, and that's going to tell me whether my answer is positive or negative. So looking here, I have 3 things being multiplied and 2 of them are negative. I have an even amount of things being multiplied that are negative, therefore I'm going to have a positive solution, a positive answer. So in this case, well, 2 times 3 is 6 times 4 is 24, and because I have two negatives, an even number, it is going to be a positive 24. This next one, I have 4 things being multiplied, but if I count the negatives, 1, 2, 3, I have 3 negative. That's an odd amount of negatives, so I know my final answer is going to be negative. And now I can pay attention to the numbers being multiplied. Let's see, 4 times 2 is 8, times 3 is 24, times 4 would be, let's see, 24 times 4 is 80, and if 4 times 4 is 16, so I'm going to get negative 96. Okay, So you can see that that rule that we just talked about in terms of the odd or even is going to come up a lot. And it also works if we only have two, right? Like up here, I only have one thing negative. That's an odd number. So I'm going to have a negative answer. Okay, so it's kind of like a big overarching rule that we can use, all right? Down here, again, I have 3 negatives, so I know my final answer is going to be negative. And then 5 times 1 times 11 is 55, so negative 55 would be my answer. This also works when we're talking about exponents. Remember, exponents is showing repeated multiplication. So when I see negative 3 to the 4th, what I'm really saying is, hey, take negative 3 and multiply by itself 4 times. Well, even exponents, as you may know from the past, even exponents will give you positive answers, right? When we square something, it's always positive. Why is that the case? Because we're going to have an even number of negative if it's a negative number going to that exponent, all right? So negative 3 to the 4th, negative 3 times negative 3 times negative 3 times negative 3 will be a positive 81. There's an even number of negatives, and 3 times 3 times 3 times 3 is 81. Negative 2 to the 5th, I know will be negative because it's to an odd power. So a negative number to an odd power has an odd number of negatives. In this case, 2 times 2 is 4, times 2 is 8, times 2 is 16, times 2 is negative 32. What about when variables get involved? Does that mess anything up? Well, we're still just kind of paying attention to the coefficients when we're going to multiply them. So here, this should have a multiplication symbol right there. But I have 4b times negative 3b times b. Well, I have two coefficients really being multiplied. There's a 1 here, but it's not as important. But 4 times negative 3 is going to be negative 12. And then I go ahead and I multiply my variables. Well, b times b times b, that's going to be b to the 3rd power. Right? Repeated multiplication, I'm multiplying b 3 times. Oh, we can pop up all the answers here as we go. All right, let's compare real quick a difference here, and then we're going to kind of move on to the division. So what's the difference between the one on the left and the one on the right? Well, when we start using calculators, it's going to be really important that we pay attention to the differences between these two kinds of problems, all right? The one on the left is negative 3 times negative 3. Right? We're saying, hey, take negative 3 and square it. The one on the right is take 3 squared and make it negative. Your calculator will read these extremely differently. They'll read it the way it's supposed to be read, and they're going to get different answers. If you notice, over here I got negative 9, and over here I got 9. All right, so you need to pay attention to, am I squaring negative 3, or am I doing 3 squared and then making it negative? Putting it in parentheses says, hey, negative 3 to the 2nd power. This says 3 squared, make it negative. The opposite of 3 squared is really what that's saying. So pay attention, and especially if you're using your calculator, pay attention to how you're typing that in to get the thing that you want to get the required result that you're looking for. All right, so for division, now we're going to talk about the rules for division. And honestly, these are going to look very familiar because they're pretty much the same rules we had for multiplication. If the signs are the same, your quotient will be positive. And if they're different, your quotient will be negative. Okay, so when you have division, if the numerator and the denominator that you're dividing have the same sign, it'll be positive. If they're different, it will be negative. So negative 18 divided by 3, that'll be negative. One's positive, one's negative. If they're both negative, it'll be positive. All right, and then even if I have multiple divisions, we're going to use that same thing as before, where do I have an even number or an odd number of things being divided that are negative, and that'll change what my sign's going to be. All right, let's do some examples here. So how about this? 20w minus 15 divided by 5. So if I want to simplify this expression, what I'm going to do is I'm going to look and say, all right, this division problem really is the same thing. I can kind of rewrite it as 20w divided by 5 minus 15 divided by 5. And then I go ahead and simplify these. 20 divided by 5 is 4w, and that'll be positive. I have a positive divided by a positive. And then here, I put the minus sign out here, but even if you put it up here, a negative divided by a positive, we're going to get a minus 3 or a negative 3, and there it is, simplified. All right, so we can simplify it. We see, oh, negative divided by positive, that'll be negative. All right, same thing with this one down here. Well, first I have a multiplication problem. And we're going to see that a lot where the multiplication and division can be mixed together. But as long as we're solid with our rules, we should be able to do that in any order we want. So in the numerator, I'm going to get negative 84x. and in the denominator I have -4. Now that I've done that multiplication up here, I can go ahead and do this division. I'm going to have a negative divided by a negative, which is going to give me a positive. So I end up with 21x. All right. One little trick I want to show you all that I've seen from some teachers in 7th grade that you may know before is the magic triangle. All right, just a little bit of an extra thing if you like a visual device to help you out. Okay. When you're going to do division or multiplication and there's two terms, you can use this magic triangle to help you remember that same signs are positive and different signs are negative. Basically, if you're doing a multiplication or division of two terms, it involves a negative. You can draw this triangle, and what you want to do is you want to take your hand and you cover up whatever the signs are. So if you're multiplying two negatives, you would cover those up and see a plus, and that would tell you, oh, it's going to be positive. Or if you're doing a positive times a negative, you cover up the plus and minus, and you see a minus, oh, it's going to be negative. It's just a little helpful visual way to remind you if you're multiplying with negatives, whether it's going to be positive or whether it's going to be negative. All right. Thank you all for watching.